Hey, good morning, everybody. It is the 19th of May, 2025. I am on my way to some meetings in Tampa today, and wrapped up last week from Wednesday all the way through to yesterday late afternoon, the Trans World Conference and the IBBA conference. And I wrote about this really quickly on LinkedIn yesterday, but we had Damon Johns from Shark Tank. It was like a fireside chat format, and two key takeaways. Well, let's make it three takeaways. First, he kind of, not jokingly, but very seriously, kind of asked the question of the crowd, how many were using AI? And I'm not going to say the percentage of the people in the crowd that were, but it was less than 50. And he said, in no uncertain terms, that the rest of you are behind the power curve and it's game over. He then went on to say that AI is going to destroy the economy as we know it. Strong words, really strong words, but accurate words. And, as I sat in the room where the average age was probably in their 60s, I thought to myself that the ability of people to change and adjust. We later on that day raised hands for another segment of the meeting to kind of get a feel for the populace that was in the room, the demographics of the room, and probably less than 10% were under the age of 40. So it was, and I dare say that exists in a lot of industries, in the professional classes, where you're required to have a good amount of reserve cash flow. That represents both a threat and an opportunity depending on who you are. But John's comment about the destruction of the economy, that is not the first time that has occurred. Where the economy has had a technological change that has been so dramatic that the world as you know it flips upside down. Leaders at all level of society, whether they be political and education, or even in your household, need to adjust to that and prepare for that, and prepare everyone around them, their children, their employees, themselves, to cope with the change that's about to occur. Now, I'm not ringing the dinner bell of danger, but it is not by chance, here's my Catholic plug, that the new Pope picked the name he picked. So you guys and gals who are not students of Catholic history, the last Leo was Pope right at the peak of the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the 1890s. And he wrote a particular letter to the world. It's called an encyclical, about workers' rights, the danger of socialism, capitalism, the importance of work, the dignity of work as it relates to people and their purpose. And there was a hat tip on the part of the Pope, the new Pope, that he sees, and he later talks about this in an interview not shortly after his election, that we are entering into another industrial revolution of sorts. So back to John's echoing that. He didn't reference it, but he echoed it. Said that people need to embrace it. It is something not to be feared, but it is something to be used. There will be disruption, but from that disruption can come good things if we embrace it. Second bullet, he talked about education for children, how we in the United States do not educate our children in finance. We spend a whole lot of money teaching people to become workers. He briefly opined that the education system, again, this kind of goes to our earlier bullet about preparing for what is to come, is based upon an economic model that existed 20, 30 years ago. It was designed to create workers. Literally, by the way, the education system was in its current structure. The grammar school, for example, was created by Frederick the Great back in the 1700s. Anyways, I agree with him wholeheartedly on the education front. And we see it in our schools where the teachers, because they don't know how to use the tool, are afraid of inculcating technology, the likes of artificial intelligence into our systems. Revolution going to occur. It's going to cause disruption. My personal belief is it's going to fall to the hands of the parents in concert with the children to learn alongside, look forward in the magic 8-ball, and predict what the world will look like in the future, and try our level best using the technology that's coming to educate ourselves and our kids go forward. The final bullet, let's say it was education, it was artificial intelligence, and then final bullet was something that also resonated to me. Again, not a new idea at all. But he said the solution you create creates another problem. And you saw people's heads spin, but that resonated with me. About literally 30 years ago, I read a book called The Fifth Discipline, written by a guy named Peter Senge. And Senge was talking about learning organizations and how we're dysfunctional as organizations, and the things we do in companies are often a function of the solutions we're creating to solve a problem. And one of the classics in the book is a supply chains puzzle. So, the analogy for present day would be, we have a hurricane here in Florida, everybody rushes on the toilet paper, and there's a run on the toilet paper, so production overstocks, and then we have a surplus of toilet paper. Senge came up with these 11 discipline rules, and the first one is that the cure is worse than disease. Exactly what Damon said. Every time we come up with a problem or have a problem, we create a solution. We think we've solved the problem, and the solution creates another problem. And so on it goes. Because we don't think in a systematic way. We think in a industrial revolution, X plus Y equals Z, when we now live in a world that's three-dimensional, multinational, etc. So, all great things to think about. It had me pondering a lot of things. I'm not going to go into what I was thinking about as I looked at the crowd I was sitting with, but a lot about technology changing, but there's still a human element. And what I've kind of come to a conclusion on is that we're still human beings, and we can mitigate the chaos if we start to really exercise our brains and not think systematically, and recognize that some of the ways we've been trained are limiting factors. I was talking to a colleague who is a really talented engineer, and he defaults to thinking in a right brain manner. That's just his DNA. That's not a bad thing or a good thing. But in that case, for example, he probably should surround himself with people who don't think that way. That's going to cause naturally some tension. And if you think about high-performing teams, they're usually organized in a manner in which there's multiple personalities, thought processes, and ways of approaching things. But they also have a level of humility that allows them to recognize the talents of others and their own personal weaknesses, so that nobody has to be right. It's going to be a choppy next 25, 30 years. But we'll get through it like we've gotten through every other industrial, the Bronze Age, the printing press, freaking the Industrial Revolution, and now this. This is nothing new, folks. And if you take a look back, see how we cope with it, maybe we can learn a few things and adjust on a few things. Have a great day.